We're speaking today to Rob Gell. Rob is perhaps best known for his pioneering work presenting the weather across 3 commercial networks for 3 decades. But that's just one of many hats. He's also been a teacher, a university lecturer, an author and an environmental consultant. He's now the President of the Royal Society of Victoria, the building we're sitting in today. He joined the Royal Society when he graduated as a geomorphologist from Melbourne University in the 1970s. Welcome, Rob.
Hi, Bill. Good to see you.
So, the idea of the weather being presented by a scientist is kind of common now, but it wasn't when you started. Why did you want to get out of science and into presenting?
Oh, I didn't want to. I was asked to. It's an interesting story, and your premise is correct. The proposition was put by the new director of news at Channel O, for those people who can remember Channel O, that they no longer wanted somebody from show business who knew all about how to present the weather, but nothing about the weather. Neither did they actually want somebody from the Weather Bureau who knew all about the weather, but nothing about how to present it. So their proposition was they wanted a teacher type person. And I'd been teaching at the Melbourne State College and then went on to Melbourne University. So, and as a geographer, I always argue as a geographer geomorphologist that we simply use maps and diagrams to tell stories. I was given the position in the beginning of 1979, and I guess the rest is history because I did it with 31 years or thereabouts, and we were able to initiate some new ideas and bring some new thinking about how you might do that. And I simply wanted to make it a credible presentation, but based on science.
And so you're still in the business of communicating science here at the Royal Society. Tell me a little bit about your role as the president here.
Well, I'm hoping to, with a terrific council we have now and a wonderful CEO, to really build new relationships. I'm disappointed perhaps in Australia's position globally. We've been a laggard on climate science, for example, and our recently produced or released State of the Environment report shows we have a long way to go on those 2 critical issues of anthropogenic global heating and biodiversity habitat loss. We have a lot to do. And Victoria, in fact, has the worst record on the Commonwealth of Australia in habitat loss and biodiversity loss, and Australia is probably the worst developed nation on the planet in terms of how we've managed the continent. So I think that the climate wars, as they've been referred to, have enabled individuals to devalue science. You can have a belief about science now, which is not what science is about. Science is a method and a process. So I'm now about science-based decision-making, promoting science-based decision-making in everything that we do. So it's really science and society, and also promoting science speaking with one voice. We're fortunate that this building has been around since 1854. So in the early days of the colony, there was sort of the Parliament, and the Melbourne Club and the Royal Society. This is where all the tech heads and all the geeks came and talked about how we're going to develop. So Burke and Wills was funded by business from here. When we were Smelbourne in the 1880s, prosperous city after the gold rush, but the streets were running with sewage. The sewage system for Melbourne was designed by the members of the Royal Society of Victoria. So we have to get back to a much more prominent position. I'm inviting any number of, that's why I'm delighted to have this opportunity to speak to you about how the Parliament can, how we can sit next to the Parliament, because the Parliament actually needs to have a good scientific base, and I appeal to the Parliament to draw on the resources of the membership of the Royal Society scientists to help make decisions.
And you say we need to do that about science. Do you think science is under threat? What sort of position do you think science is in contemporary society? I
don't think it's under threat, and particularly here in Victoria. Melbourne already is the science and technology capital. Our biotech sector is impeccable and very, very strong. But there is value in us promoting science and technology to reinforce that, because it's in science and technology in future decades where major amounts of investment are going to come. And Melbourne has that capacity. Our universities are spectacular, and we need to find a way for the Royal Society's membership as a non-profit organisation, but quite independent of the universities and the government, to actually play a role in bringing science and communicating science to the community in any way we possibly can. So Science Week's coming up. So we operate Science Week under a federal government program called Inspiring Victoria or Inspiring Australia. So, and that's about taking science out across Victoria through our public libraries and our neighbourhood houses and anybody else who wants to be involved, to say, well, where's my point of engagement with science and how can I enjoy science? And of course a whole range of other things that we absolutely need to promote, for example, STEM in schools and things like that. So we're very, very focused on that science engagement part.
And you mentioned earlier the Parliament. The Royal Society has a relationship with the Parliament. The last few years we've presented various seminars together alongside the Victorian Parliamentarians for STEM. What does that mean to the Royal Society? Why is that an important relationship?
Well, the Parliament is the core of our society. So we think it's an essential partnership. We're delighted that it's growing as well. There's a couple of key people in the Parliament that are really pushing, and I invite any parliamentarians looking on, please come and join us. We should be able to be absolutely ecumenical about STEM. And so we're both sides, or there's more than one side of the house now, so we want all parliamentarians with an interest, but with an understanding of the need to promote the sort of things that the Royal Society wants to promote. It's essential that we do it on an ecumenical basis. So we're delighted to have the forum. We acknowledge that your media capacity and your capacity to reach out to the population of Victoria is exemplary. It's beautiful. Plus, there are two other things I might mention. There's a high level of cachet in doing that. I mean, presenting, as we've done recently, a session on biodiversity, and the Society is very focused. We're developing a new position on biodiversity, very timely, with the release of the State of the Environment report as well. But it's important that those very important dialogues are taken to that level and be seen to be supported by the Parliament. That, as the Society is, so we're looking at, how do we learn from Indigenous scientists, which arguably perhaps have been around in this state for 40,000 years or more? What have they learned, and what can we learn from them? And how do we blend that together valuably?
Just zooming out, science. What are the areas of science that you're really excited about? What are the things that you're looking forward to, developing in the next little while?
We're immediately focused on the sort of two existential crises. So we've just reformulated our position on climate with the Australian Meteorological and Oceanographic Society. That's where our best climate scientists reside. So we're adopting their position. Why would we try to duplicate it? The second existential crisis, as I mentioned, is biodiversity. We also have, interestingly enough, we do have a working group inside this science organisation, which is a working group looking at sustainable finance. Because now we have to work out, how do we create flows of capital to support nature? We haven't done that. Now, it's interesting, and something that's coming up in our dialogues. The City of Melbourne, on the City of Melbourne's coat of arms, there's a right whale in one of the four little sectors. Melbourne exported whale oil to London, right? We exploited nature. And similarly, the gold rush, you might say we exploited gold and made ourselves rich. We now need to understand that nature underpins our economy. So that's why we're talking at high level with some very good economists about how do we now reorganise and have that dialogue about economics and nature as an extension of the biodiversity crisis, to make sure that we can now reorganise our flows of capital to support biodiversity that actually underpins our economy. So that's going to be a strong part of our next phase. And we're putting together some interesting groups to come and meet here and have those discussions. I think that then there are all the obvious things. There's AI and technology, and that links back to manufacturing, the circular economy. So I think all of those things are new, and they're coming along, and they're absolutely on our agenda to consider. And we're wanting to draw people into those conversations, and that's exactly what our role is as an organisation, promoting and enhancing science, but as science and society. So we welcome any contributions. Write to me, to science, to the President at Royal Society of Victoria, and we'll publish a letter. We want to get those conversations and dialogues going.
Fantastic, Rob. Rob Gell, thanks so much for talking to us today.
Been a pleasure, Bill.